as in life, sometimes you get these big ups and downs, and we have taken a real knock.
The SNP win an unprecedented majority in the Scottish Parliament, paving the way for a future referendum on independence.
This is not just a victory for a single political party. I believe it's a victory for a society, a people and a nation.
The Conservative vote holds up well in England. The Prime Minister says he will fight against Scottish independence.
If they want to hold a referendum, I will campaign to keep our United Kingdom together with every single fibre that I have.
Labour make gains in England and most notably in Wales, though fall short of a clear majority. And the BBC Tonight is predicting a big defeat for the campaign to introduce the alternative vote system. We'll have the latest. Our other main story tonight: neither intelligence lapses nor the response of the emergency services contributed to the deaths during the London bombings. The verdict of the coroner, who ruled that the 52 people who died were killed unlawfully.
And coming up on Inside F1 on BBC News at 6:30, it's slippery when wet. There's a troubled return to Turkey for world champion Sebastian Vettel.
Good evening and welcome to the BBC News at 6. It's the first significant test of public opinion since the coalition government was formed. And the results of yesterday's vote have resulted in a drubbing for one part of that coalition, the Liberal Democrats. With most of the votes counted now in the race for local councils in England, the Lib Dems have lost almost half their councillors. The party leader Nick Clegg called it a real knock and said they'd been blamed for the coalition spending cuts. In Scotland, an historic victory for the SNP paves the way for a future referendum on full independence, and it means the Scottish National Party is the first party to gain full control of the Parliament. And in the referendum on whether to change the voting system to the alternative vote, the BBC is predicting an overwhelming victory for the No campaign. We'll have the details and how the results could shape the political landscape across the UK. Our Deputy Political Editor, James Landale, has our first report tonight.
In Luton, their heads were down. In Hull, they shook their heads in disbelief. And in Derby, some even wept. Today, Liberal Democrats across the country learned the price they've paid for power. The worst election results in their 23-year history, as voters across Scotland, England and Wales punished them for their compromises in coalition.
We're clearly getting the brunt of the blame. And I think for many families in those parts of the country especially, there are also some very strong memories of what life was like under Thatcherism in the 1980s, and somehow a fear that that's what we're returning to. And what we need to do is redouble our efforts to not only explain but show that precisely one of the reasons the Liberal Democrats are in government are so that we don't go backwards as a country, but that we go forwards.
So he travelled to Stockport, one of several councils in the north of England where they lost control, to reassure party members. Some want him to fight their corner harder in cabinet, some, though, want more.
Nick Clegg has become a laughingstock, unfortunately. I think that's actually unfair. But he is the leader, and he becomes the personification of that attitude amongst the public.
Biggest issue that came up on the doorstep was tuition fees, but also the way that Nick Clegg has run the coalition deal, and I'm in favour of the coalition, but I think he's run it very badly, and in my view he should resign immediately.
That may be unlikely, but the question remains, how long can Nick Clegg and his team in here tolerate the kind of losses they've just suffered and stay in the coalition?
For the Conservatives, it was a different night. Just look at these smiles. They survived largely unscathed. Losses in Scotland, yes, but in England they actually ended up gaining seats in councils. There was, though, no crowing over the Lib Dems.
I'm absolutely committed to make this coalition government that I believe is good for Britain work for the full 5 years of this term. And it's then that I believe the coalition and its parties will be properly judged by the electorate. But I would pay tribute to the work that Liberal Democrats have done and are doing in this coalition and will go on doing, as we're absolutely committed to making sure it works hard for the people of Britain.
Alex Salmond, though, doesn't do modest and couldn't keep a smile off his face. His Scottish nationalists wiped the board, securing the first absolute majority in the Scottish Parliament, making a referendum on Scottish independence a real prospect.
I'm finding it difficult to catch up with all of the incredible advances across Scotland. I mean, clearly we've seen a very substantial movement to the SNP in the last week. And I was saying in my speech, I think we can trace that almost entirely to Labour's extraordinary decision to relaunch their campaign as an all-out assault on Scottish independence.
Either way, Labour's campaign failed. They lost seats and votes across their former strongholds, and their leader in Scotland, Ian Gray, said he'd step down. Their leader in London was more cheerful, visiting Kent to emphasise the party's new, if not overwhelming, gains in the south of England, as well as hailing a new working majority in the Welsh Assembly. Labour, he said, was on its way back.
I know we've got further to go to rebuild trust and to win back support. But the most important thing about these elections is not about politicians, it's about people. And people have sent a very clear message to the Liberal Democrats and to the Conservative-led government about what they're doing. And they've said to Nick Clegg, you don't have permission to be supporting Conservative policies on tuition fees, the NHS, and indeed on the deficit.
And as for that referendum on the alternative vote, well, counting is still underway. But early results suggest that voters have rejected change by an astonishing majority of around 70% of people saying no. The scale of the defeat, yet more pressure on Nick Clegg and his party. James Landell, BBC News, Westminster.
So, as we've been hearing, the results have delivered a stunning victory for the Scottish National Party and their leader, Alex Salmond. The SNP gained 22 seats in all at the expense of both the Liberal Democrats and Labour to give them a total of 69, enough to command an unprecedented majority in Holyrood. After the party's poor showing, Labour's leader in Scotland, Ian Gray, said he would step down. James Cook reports now on the Scottish nationalist success and what it might mean for Scottish independence.
He's back. Alex Salmond arriving in Edinburgh this evening in presidential style. But will he be president of an independent Scotland?
Later this evening, I'll be speaking to the Prime Minister and laying down markers as to what this result, what this mandate means in terms of Scotland's relationship with the United Kingdom.
For Labour, it was the worst performance in 80 years.
10,120 votes.
The party was born in Scotland's industrial heartlands. They used to weigh the Labour vote here. Instead, seat after seat fell to the SNP. And at 2:27 p.m, this.
David, Scottish National Party, 12,579 votes.
Kirkcaldy, of all places, Gordon Brown's hometown, handed victory to the Nationalists. By just a few votes, Ian Gray clung on to his seat, but he now intends to resign as Scottish Labour leader.
We have to address some very fundamental questions. I want to start that process off, but in the autumn I will stand down, and it will be for the Labour Party to decide how we go forward.
Much to ponder too for the Liberal Democrats. The collapse in their support helped the SNP to victory.
Our vote has switched across to the SNP, and I find that disappointing, but we have to deal with the realities of the circumstances we find ourselves in.
So Scotland has spoken, but what exactly has it said? Is this a vote of confidence in the devolved government here, or is it a nationalist revolution, a vote for independence?
Even although you can vote for the SNP, for this Parliament, I don't think it means you want independence. You just don't want the Labour Party.
I think it shows that people maybe want to see it, yeah. I think it's up to the people to decide, and it's quite a good thing.
It just shows a vote for the SNP. The independence didn't seem to be a big issue in their campaign at all.
Scottish Conservative and Unionist.
The Tories also had a bad election, but they now sense a fight.
On the issue of the United Kingdom, if they want to hold a referendum, I will campaign to keep our United Kingdom together with every single fibre that I have.
And so, for the first time in centuries, the prospect of Scottish independence is real. This small, proud nation will vote on whether to leave the United Kingdom. James Cook, BBC News, Edinburgh.
Well, in a moment, the view from Westminster with our political editor, Nick Robinson. But first, our Scotland political editor, Brian Taylor, is in Edinburgh. Brian, this is an extraordinary result for the SNP. What's it mean for Scotland and its relationship with the rest of the UK?
It is a stunning result. It is an astounding result. To stress that, bear in mind that the voting system for the Scottish Parliament behind me here was deliberately devised by Labour to prevent the SNP from gaining a majority, but the scope of their victory tonight has simply swatted that aside and changed all the rules, and they have gone through to victory. What does it mean for the relationship with the UK? Well, it gives them a mandate for a referendum, not a mandate for independence. This is a mandate for a referendum, not UDI. And it is possible, indeed probable, that there isn't a direct switchover between the support in these elections for the domestic devolved government of Alex Salmond and the prospect of independence. But also, the Labour Party spent a fortnight trying to scare people off the voting for Alex Salmond by stressing his support for independence at the very core of his party. And it seems that people were not scared by that.
And Nick, in Westminster, the first results on the alternative vote referendum are coming in. The BBC is predicting a massive defeat for the AV campaign. What more can you tell us?
Well, we've got results now in from more than 100 areas of the country, about another 300 to come in the next 4 or 5 hours. And yes, we are now talking of a prediction of a vote for no of more than 70%, maybe 1 or 2 points higher than that, and it is quite possible that not a single area of the country will vote for a change in the voting system. Yet one more reason why David Cameron is celebrating tonight, though in front of the cameras the order has gone out for Tories not to be seen celebrating, not to gloat. Another reason why the Liberal Democrats are feeling battered and bruised.
And the results for the councils in England and the results in Scotland and Wales, what's your assessment?
Well, overall, it reminds me of what we felt a year ago. Remember then, exactly a year ago today, the British general election. The results could not be predicted. The consequences were completely unpredictable. Who would have foreseen the scale of the drubbing being given to the Liberal Democrats, losing to the SNP in Scotland, Labour in the north, and irony of ironies to the Tories, their coalition partners in the south? Who would have foreseen that David Cameron would actually be celebrating gains amongst councils and councillors, not losses? And so now we have a coalition that won't fall now. There's talk of a challenge to Nick Clegg's leadership, but not from anyone particularly serious. Instead, the real talk is about him putting up a fight, in his words, against a return to Thatcherism. So you should expect a more difficult few weeks and months for the coalition. Alex Salmond is an intriguing situation in Scotland. He now has a majority in Parliament in Scotland, committed to independence, but public opinion which is not similarly committed. So although he, Alex Salmond and David Cameron are the clear victors tonight, I'm reminded of that old Chinese proverb, beware what you wish for.
Nick Robinson in Westminster, Brian Taylor in Edinburgh, thank you both very much indeed. Well, while the politicians are digesting the significance of it all for Westminster, for Holyrood and all over the UK, the BBC's Jeremy Vine is on hand to make sense of the statistics for us. And he joins us now. Jeremy.
Fiona, let's have a look at first what we call projected national share. The shares the parties would have got had this been a national election, spreading those council results out. 37% for Labour in first place, based on these council results. And for the Conservatives, second place here with 35%, and then the Lib Dems right down on 15%, and the others 13%. So that's projected national share. That's the result of extrapolated from the council results last night. Now you see the change. There were council elections last year, and we can make a comparison here. And based on that, Labour are up 10%, as you can see. The interesting one here, Conservatives 0, level pegging since last year. They're not taking so much of a hit as their coalition partners, the Liberal Democrats. Just look at that, 11% down for the Lib Dems. And then you can see the others up 1%. If I show you a map of England, we can colour it in the colours the election has left the councils in. And if I flash the gains, you'll see where councils have changed hands. First thing you notice, that Labour haven't really got out of their territory in the north, their heartlands. And actually in the south, there's a bit more blue than was being predicted. The Conservatives turned out to be very good at fighting off the Liberal Democrats. We'll take a look at the councillors, how many more or less councillors these parties have since they last fought these seats in 2007. And the Conservatives, you can see, again, confounding some of the expectations, have actually gone up a bit since the last time these were fought, 48. They've got extra. Labour doing very well indeed with 742 extra councillors. The Lib Dems, again, the ones who are taking the hit. Look at this, 619 councillors down, wiped out of power in some of their important citadels. Now, the other really major story of the evening, the biggest story of the evening, really, was what happened in Scotland with the SNP. This is the map. The Liberal Democrats are in orange. They're over there on the islands. But actually, if you look down through the map of Scotland, it's all yellow. It's SNP yellow. And you'll see what's happened inside the Scottish Parliament. If we take you inside, it wasn't thought, as the Scottish political editor was saying, wasn't thought possible for a party to go through 65. But the SNP under Alex Salmond have done it. 69 seats to them. 15 for the Conservatives, 5 Lib Dems, 2 for the Scottish Greens, 1 other, and 37 for Labour, who are going to be looking for a new leader very soon. So it's a remarkable night for the SNP. Overall, good for Labour. The Conservatives doing better than expected, and the Liberal Democrats just plunging.
Jeremy, thank you. In Northern Ireland, the counting is still going on, with the full results not expected until tomorrow, but the Democratic Unionists and Sinn Féin are still likely to dominate the polling. In Wales, Labour had a good night, gaining 4 seats, but are just short of an overall majority in the Welsh Assembly. Labour now has 30 seats, the Conservatives have 14, Plaid Cymru 11, and the Lib Dems 5. In a moment, we'll get the latest from Northern Ireland. But first, Howell Griffith reports from Wales.
In Wales, there's been a revival. Labour have exceeded expectations by bringing back their traditional vote and squeezing out the other parties. Labour have had their strongest ever showing in Wales by taking half the seats at the National Assembly, but they've fallen agonisingly short of complete control. So what next? Could Wales be in line for another coalition, the third in just over a decade of devolution, or something more informal?
What's important is that we look at new ways of doing politics. For example, a Labour government is one option, but working closely with other parties where there are mutual interests.
With Labour calling the shots, Plaid Cymru and the Lib Dems are poised for the call. The talking, texting and tweeting has already begun.
There's been no discussions with the Labour Party. Clearly the ball is in their court. What's important to the Welsh Liberal Democrats is that we do have a stable government over the next 5 years, and a government that is willing to tackle the very serious problems that are facing our nation.
Whoever forms the next government in Cardiff Bay faces 5 years of having to impose cuts. The decisions being made now cannot be rushed if they are to last. Howell Griffith, BBC News, Cardiff Bay.
Here in Northern Ireland, it'll be some time yet before all 108 seats in the Stormont Assembly are filled. Counting only began this morning, and it's been slow. By late this afternoon, no one had been elected, even though the process began at 8 o'clock this morning. But the early indications were that not much would change in Northern Ireland, with the Democratic Unionists expected to win the most seats and Peter Robinson to retain the position of First Minister. His supporters have already started to celebrate.
It's very pleasing and rewarding to hear that right across the province our candidates are doing so well, because they put a lot of work into it and they deserve it.
Sinn Féin are also confident of a good result, but it'll be tomorrow before the full picture in Northern Ireland becomes clear. Mark Simpson, BBC News, Belfast.
And a reminder, there's more detail about the elections online, including a guide to the results in your area. Simply enter your postcode for the results on our special website. The address bbc.co.uk/vote2011. And the time is just coming to 6:20. Our top story tonight, the BBC is predicting a serious defeat for the campaign for the alternative vote. And the voters have punished the Liberal Democrats in the first electoral test since the coalition government and the cuts. The SNP have won an unprecedented majority in the Scottish Parliament, paving the way for a future referendum on independence.
And coming up on Inside F1 on BBC News at 6:30, there's build-up to the Turkish Grand Prix as Formula One heads to Europe. But Lewis Hamilton plays down his chances of 2 wins in 2.
There's no evidence that failings by either the intelligence services or the emergency services contributed to the deaths of the victims of the London bombings. That's according to the coroner at the inquest into the attack, in which 52 people died nearly 6 years ago. Judge Heather Hallett did, however, make recommendations about how the response to any further acts of terrorism might be improved. This report from our Home Affairs correspondent, June Kelly.
This summer sees the 6th anniversary of the London attacks. These inquests heard 5 months of evidence from 300 witnesses. They told the story of 7/7. 52 were murdered. Today, the coroner said they had been unlawfully killed in a dreadful act of terrorism. These inquests focused on how London, for some of the victims, their adopted city, responded to a long-feared attack by Islamist fanatics. The bereaved families had to take in the coroner's 60-page report, culminating in a clutch of recommendations.
Whatever is written down here, whatever is recommended, whatever has been said, can help people in the future, one would hope, and one would hope the recommendations are effective. But to me, they help me not at all. They do not bring my son back.
The response of the emergency services formed a major part of the inquests. The coroner highlighted delays in dispatching fire and ambulance crews.
Our staff were brave, they provided fantastic treatment and care, but should we have had more resources to those scenes more quickly? Yes, we should.
In her report, the coroner, Lady Justice Hallett, says, on the balance of probabilities, each of the deceased would have died whatever time the emergency services had reached and rescued them. John Taylor's only daughter, Carrie, was one of those who did not die instantly.
Could they have been saved? Well, Carrie might not have been saved, but she should have had the chance. So should have all the rest of them.
The other big area for the inquest was the role of the security service MI5 and whether the attacks could have been prevented. The final images of the 4 young men who were about to become the UK's first suicide bombers. 2 of them had come onto MI5's radar more than a year before they set off to commit mass murder. And before the bombings, a surveillance photo of the pair was cropped to this by MI5 as they tried to establish their identities. This just one area where the security service comes in for criticism from the coroner. MI5 are also accused of failing to correct errors in a report on 7/7 produced by the Parliamentary Intelligence and Security Committee. The coroner says it's essential that the ISC receives accurate information from the security service so that it can properly hold the service to account and report to the Prime Minister, Parliament and the public.
I and my government colleagues will now be considering very carefully the coroner's report and recommendations.
It's not acceptable, so she'll consider them and then nothing to happen. These recommendations have not been made lightly.
It was the worst terrorist attack on British soil, and since the 7th of July, the emergency services and MI5 both say they've learned lessons and made improvements. June Kelly, BBC News.
And just to let you know, there's a Newsnight special about the inquest into those killed in the London bombings. The programme starts at 7:30 this evening, and that's over on BBC Two. Al-Qaeda has acknowledged for the first time that Osama bin Laden is dead. A message posted on militant websites warned that the organisation would retaliate and that America's happiness will turn to sorrow. It came as new pictures emerged of the living conditions inside the compound where Osama bin Laden was shot dead at the weekend. 4 men have pleaded guilty to offences linked to a multi-million-pound child pornography ring. The 4 men, all are in their mid-30s, ran a network spanning over 40 countries. Lincolnshire police said 132 children had been removed from danger since they were arrested. One of golf's all-time greats, Xavi Ballesteros, has suffered a serious deterioration in his health, according to his family. The 54-year-old underwent surgery 3 years ago to remove a malignant brain tumour. The Spaniard won 5 majors during his career and helped the European Ryder Cup team to 5 wins, both as player and as captain. More now on our main story, the latest on the election results, and the BBC is predicting a very big defeat for the No campaign in the referendum on the alternative vote system. Let's have a final word with our political editor, Nick Robinson, who joins me from Westminster. I mean, Nick, this massive defeat the BBC is predicting for the Lib Dems and the AV referendum, how could we assess that? Is that a vote against the Lib Dems, against the party, or against their preferred voting system?
Well, I think it is a vote against a system that, frankly, very few people actually wanted. The irony is that this was a system designed to allow people to express their preferences, but very few politicians had as their first preference this particular change in the voting system. Liberal Democrats want a much greater change, the sort of proportional voting systems they have in Northern Ireland or Wales or Scotland. Many people in the Labour Party too. Very few people wanted the alternative vote, and that is now being confirmed that the public agree with that. We now have just under 170 results in, about 270 areas to go. There are now two parts of the country that have actually voted for a change in the voting system, one in Glasgow, one in South London, but it looks like an overwhelming defeat. Tory voters went with David Cameron and opposed it. Liberal Democrat voters went slightly reluctantly with their leader and backed it. The Labour Party did not go with their leader. They split down the middle. And it means that we end 24 hours of extraordinary election results with a range of emotions for our political leaders. You have got the joy on the face of Alex Salmond in Scotland, getting a result he could never have seen. You have got the despair on the face of Nick Clegg, relief for David Cameron, who can scarcely believe how lucky he is. And the sentiment in the Labour Party, I would suggest to you, is doubt. Plenty to celebrate, but much to wonder, why on earth didn't we do better?
Nick Robertson in Westminster, thank you very much indeed. Well, let's take a look at the weekend weather now. Alex Deakin is here. Hi, Alex.
Hello there, Fiona. Another warm weekend ahead, but this one is going to be accompanied by some big showers and some thundery downpours as well. Starting this evening across parts of Devon and also through Northern Ireland, turning very wet here, and the rain doesn't stop. It's going to spread across most of Wales, eventually into the Midlands, Northern England and much of Scotland. Some parts of Eastern England will stay dry. It's going to be a really warm night. A couple of nights ago we were talking about a frost tonight, double figures in many places. So it's not going to be a chilly start to Saturday, but it will be quite a wet start. Some sunny spells perhaps across parts of Wales, showers developing more widely here, and largely dry across East Anglia and the southeast. But some intense thundery showers will again develop, particularly across Northern England and parts of the Midlands. Flashes of lightning, rumbles of thunder can't be ruled out. Still generally dry across East Anglia and still pretty warm here. Temperatures in the low to maybe mid-20s in London. Most of the showers will be to the west of London. Again, some of them on the heavy side, but parts of the far southwest may have a largely dry afternoon. Some dry and sunny spells through the morning across Wales, but the showers will develop more widely here, it looks like, through the afternoon. Again, some intense downpours are possible, and a mixture of hazy sunshine and showers across Northern Ireland. With some sunshine on the north coast, we could reach 20 degrees. Quite wet first thing across Scotland, but brightening up nicely in the north. Again, 20 Celsius is possible here, but late in the day, heavy showers will again spread into southern and central Scotland. In fact, tomorrow night could be really wet indeed. The blue areas simply take hold of the map, and eventually we do actually get some rain into parts of East Anglia as well. Another mild night and a soggy start to Sunday. It should turn drier on Sunday across England, Wales and Northern Ireland. Just 1 or 2 afternoon showers. The rain takes most of the day to clear from Scotland, and it will start to feel a little bit fresher. It's going to be quite a lively weekend. Keep up to date online. Fiona.
Thanks, Alex. A reminder of tonight's main news. The BBC is predicting a big win for the No campaign in the referendum on the alternative vote system. In the local elections in England, the voters have punished the Liberal Democrats in the first big test since the coalition government and the cuts. And the SNP have won an unprecedented majority in the Scottish Parliament, paving the way for a future referendum on independence. It's nearly 6:30. Stay with us. Now it's time to join the BBC's news teams where you are. Bye-bye.
Welcome back to Vote 2011 as we see the results of the referendum on AV coming through, and there are 2 surprise results. A consolation prize for people who wanted the yes vote. Glasgow Kelvin voted yes, 59% yes, 41% no, and Lambeth in London voted yes, 55% yes, 45% no. Against that, the running total is 31% yes and 68% no in the country as a whole, very nearly 30-70. So a majority of 37% for no. So it's, well, the game's up, isn't it, Pid Hain?
Yes, it is, as I fear it always was, given the date chosen was local election, Scottish-Welsh elections, when all of us were concentrating on trying to win those, not to win the referendum. If we'd chosen a different date, I think that we could have had a quite different campaign, and I think we could have stood a much better chance of winning it.
We still have first past the post, and so of course, being the BBC, we'll wait to see 9,807